Hello and welcome to the Route One show. We're taking a look at Leeds United now, and joining me to discuss all things to do with the Whites is Sporting Life's Tom Carnduff. Hi, Tom.
Yeah.
So an eventful week
Yeah.
as always. We're going to get to what happened with Marsch, the fact that he's been let go, and we're searching for a new manager. But we can't really start anywhere else other than Old Trafford last night and Leeds United with an absolutely fantastic 2-2 draw. What did you make of it? Were you disappointed we couldn't see out the victory, or were you just happy that we went and got such an unlikely point?
I think given the circumstances where Leeds are at, I think it'd be too simplistic to say that they've dropped points there. That's absolutely a point gained. I think if it was still under Marsch and how it was before, then you could probably look at it as a bit of disappointment that they didn't hold on. But considering everything that's been going on, kind of Michael Scabala and his team and the limited time they've had really to work with it and to kind of lead them into what is a huge week, given the back-to-back fixtures between the two clubs, and to go to a team who have won their last 13 home games in all competitions and go 2-0 up is a remarkable kind of turn of events, and not many that many were expecting. I think to come out of that with a point is absolutely a point gained. It's a point more than people would have taken, and that's Leeds' game in hand where they managed to get a point out of it. So there's an advantage in that one as well. But yeah, a huge result and a massive bit of positivity, which is obviously what the club kind of needs at the moment.
Did you see anything else happening tactically last night compared to under Marsch?
I think it's a tough one, isn't it? Because of the game itself, that you look at the level of opposition, and obviously they're playing them at home on Sunday, which is a slightly different game. But to go to a top four team away from home is always difficult. But you can tell that there's definitely the element of relying upon Nonto somewhat to do stuff, which who can blame him? He's brilliant. But just kind of the wingers' impact, you saw it from Somerville there as well. The Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams partnership, I was unsure about how that was going to work, but clearly there's an understanding there from those international days, and that's clearly something that will work going forward. You could tell the noticeable stuff. I think it's probably more in the attitude and the application, and they've kind of embraced that ability to really not have the pressure on them and to really put everything that's happened over the past few days to kind of the back of their minds and go forward. But you could tell that players like Sinistera, who, again, the injury issues are just so unfortunate for him, but Somerville, Nonto continuing going forward. Rutter looked good when he came on as well. Those players who are the natural wide players, I think, are going to get a bit more joy during the transition period. It didn't seem so much like the kind of school kids playing around in the playground trying to all get the ball back element that was with Leeds as it was before. So, kind of what we expected. There weren't going to be huge sweeping changes, but there were the little adjustments that, Ten Hag spoke before the game that it's difficult. You don't know what to expect. And I think obviously scoring so early on is a huge positive in that way. But huge credit goes to Scabala and his team for creating it and being able to do so, because I think the way it's going, he's probably going to be in charge on Sunday again. So, huge positive.
Yeah, quick mention for Aronson as well, who I thought actually looked, I've not seen him like that, in that mood for a long time. I mean, he really kind of showed his skill set, didn't he? Dribbling and obviously hit the post as well. I mean, it was really good to see him back on form, wasn't it, really?
Yeah, I think he's a player as well who we've seen early on, in his early time at the club. We're like, wow, okay, this is the play. You can see why there was the January interest before. You can see why he's on the short list. I think with Aronson, it's almost kind of, I don't know whether it's a form thing and you can't really hide away from it, or I think the fact that Aronson, there was probably an emphasis on him from the defensive side of things, where you are the one to kind of lead the press from the front with that Marsch system. Aronson, clearly a reason why they brought him in, because he was such a vital part of that. Whereas it's almost kind of taken that off him and kind of reminding him, that you can have that freedom to express yourself a bit as a player as well, that don't overly concern yourself with those defensive duties, as important as they are when you're kind of on. Get onto the ball, and enjoy it. And again, maybe it's just that kind of, the way the team was prepared is obviously, I don't think there was any grand talks. There was no big, motivational things. I think it was just the current coaching staff just chatting to players individually and saying kind of what's going on. So I think probably having that weight a little bit of that, I won't say defensive focus, but certainly a player that was in the team to effectively be a key part of the entire pressing off the ball. You are leading from the front in a system that largely requires you to try and win the ball back as quickly as possible. So to maybe not have that just as much, and we'll see on Sunday, you know, what kind of the approach to that one is, but not to have that's clearly a bit of a weight lifted off him. And just for him personally, yeah, to have that good performance at a really difficult venue as well, you know, a really tough game, to put that in is a huge positive for him on what, as I've already said, was a massively positive day for Leeds.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you consider the last two results we've had at Old Trafford have been absolute nightmares. So absolutely. Do you think it was a refreshing change of voice in the changing room from Skubala as well? Because his press conference that he did, it was kind of short and sweet, but I actually kind of found it refreshing to kind of hear that type of press conference, because, you know, Jesse Marsch did have a tendency to talk a lot. And I wonder if that impact spilled over to the players as well, potentially.
Potentially a little bit. And I think you kind of looked at Marsch post-Sunday and there was a big emphasis on going to Old Trafford to get a result. And again, this is probably the compare and contrast between the scenarios, whereas if Leeds got a point last night in those circumstances, it would probably be seen a positive. Of course, it's a point gain that you probably wouldn't expect, but the nature of it would come under more scrutiny. Whereas where they're at now, it's the realism of it's a caretaker situation, and to go 2-0 up anyway is a fantastic part of it. And to hold on for something, then that's a bigger positive than it is. I think so. I think probably a kind of the tone of his press conference and things like that, it's very, very good media train type thing, which is always don't say too much. And he didn't really do that. He did that very well, but he also kind of lowered, I wouldn't want to say lowered expectation, but kind of kept everyone reasonable. This is a temporary situation. Look, we're playing Man United at Old Trafford. This is going to be massively difficult. We'll try and see what happens. If we can, I think he used the word, if we can kind of smash and grab something or steal something, words to that effect, then great. And, you know, that's the realistic aim of it. And it's kind of almost indirectly, and whether he intentionally did it or not, that takes a huge amount of pressure off the players, because it's not going into it thinking, oh my God, we need to get something here. It's okay, you know, let's go, let's just play, let's see what happens, and we'll go from there. So I think his overall conduct, his, you know, press conference before the game, the press conference after and stuff like that, it's just the perfect kind of tone just to calm everyone down. Because after Sunday's result, I mean, the result is one thing. The second half performance was just so bad. Panic starts to set in, and ultimately we're only halfway through the season. So I think that kind of just having that new voice to come in and almost be a bit more reassuring, and to remind people that it's far from over. There's a long way to go yet. I think it's just taken a massive pressure off everyone, and it's demonstrated in kind of the result that came out, because it's a point from these two games that, being realistic, it's probably a point more than people would have expected.
Yeah, and it makes a difference to the table as well. Just looking at the league table today, I'm like, oh, you know, we've gone above West Ham, and just feels like, you know, we've made that bit of progress we were desperate for after Sunday's result. Just want to rewind them back to Marsch's last game of the season. After that Nottingham Forest game on Sunday, were you Marsch out, or where was your thinking with it? And were you surprised that the club acted so quickly? Because I was.
Yeah, I think we kind of spoke about it and touched upon it last week, didn't we? I think whatever happened in the Forest and the back-to-back Man United games, I didn't think he was going there. And the subsequent managerial search and what's happened there suggests that this, again, was probably not a decision that they had any intention of making going into the weekend. I was very much willing to give Marsch time in this, especially after the transfer window. You go, okay, I've said it before, I think how bad Leeds were has been overblown a little bit compared to some of the other teams down there. And you watch teams in Premier League a lot, and there are some genuinely bad teams down there. I don't think Leeds fall into that category at the moment. So I was kind of giving him that bit of patience. And especially the first half, you go, look, they've got Forest, and their sign everyone approach took them to a ridiculously good goalkeeper who showed it in the first half. And Leeds could have easily had a couple of goals in that first half. And it was, you know, an error from Strike in committing the foul. They don't defend the set piece. They score. Game state comes into it. And that's probably the story of Marsch's Leeds, that when you factor in the game state and moments that mattered, that's truly when Leeds struggled. If they didn't take those early chances, that's it. They couldn't find a way really consistently to take the moments when they mattered. And that was evident on Sunday. And that second half, I think that kind of started to sway my opinion a little bit, that it's not a defining game of the season by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a game against another team in the same area of the table. They make a simple switch in putting Sergio Aurier at right back to try and nullify Willy Gnonto, and Leeds have no idea what to do at that point. And I think at that stage, that is really when it's like, okay, this is a problem now. This is a serious problem that they're in, that simple switches like that. There's no kind of backup plan. They don't really know what to do. You could tell the belief had just completely gone as well. Going into half time, I think you go, well, they'll probably get something. The way they're going, there's a reason to be positive here. I think that completely faded as the half went on. And
taking Rocker off, I was just
that for me was one sub where you kind of go in, I don't think that he knows how to get out of this at this stage. And obviously, kind of, even then, I didn't think they would. I think, that they've clearly gone all in on him. You saw it in the transfer window, the players that came in. Although, as suited as they were to the system, I don't think they were strictly signing him for Marsch. I think they were just 3 very good signings that have improved the team. So I just didn't expect it to happen. But that Sunday second half really kind of swayed my opinion. And I think, as tough as it was for him, because he was always going to be tough following in Bielsa's footsteps, wasn't it? And I think the comparisons to Marsch not being Bielsa were incredibly unfair on him. It's not his fault, the circumstances. But as time went on, the criticism wasn't that he wasn't Bielsa. It's that there are just flaws to this way of playing. There aren't answers. There aren't the solutions that come with it. And ultimately, that happens in football. If you can't take your chances, you need to work out a way to get something out of the game. And too frequently, Leeds weren't taking their chances. And then moments after that, that's it. When the game states against them, they couldn't get out of it. So, I think that Monday, if they beat Man United twice, if they got 4 points against Man United, it's incredibly hard. Whether they would have or wouldn't have, it's incredibly then hard for the board to say, okay, we should get rid of him now. Obviously, the conversations are always there, and you just have to act at that point because you kind of dug a little bit of a hole for yourself in doing so.
What do you think tipped them over then? Do you think it was the away fans that had turned on Marsch and the online reaction to that Sunday game? Because, like you say, it definitely feels like they were planning to stick with him, and I think Victor Orta still wanted to back him by all accounts. Do you think though, just the reaction to it was just too much, and they thought, right, we've got to do this now?
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons. Sunday has to be a big part of that. That second half onwards, I think you saw the fan reaction. I mean, the fans have never truly warmed to him. And again, as we say, whoever it was coming in after Bielsa, it was always going to be a difficult job. I think Marsch, to his credit, tried his best to become an approachable person in and around the club and stuff like that. And he really tried to be someone who, and he spoke about it early days, didn't he? He knows it's going to be tough following in. But you see the performances and that fan reaction is understandable. They're not winning games. There's only so far good performances can take you. You need to start winning games. And I think
there was a large chunk this season as well where they weren't playing well. That run, that initial run, that winless streak they had before the Liverpool win. I mean, they were poor game after game in that run. And it just feels like it's taken so long to get to this point. And, he had nearly a year in charge. Yeah,
it's patchy though, isn't it? They started the season very well. The period after that was pretty poor. And then post-World Cup break, I think they've played all right. I think they've actually, you kind of looked at it and went, okay, maybe this 6-week period, they've really addressed the situation that's allowed them to reset. And again, there's only so far I can say they were unlucky, but ultimately West Ham, they probably should have won. Villa, they should have won, let alone get something out of it. Man City's Man City, you've got to take it. And the point away at Newcastle was very good. And then that's only so far it could take. You need to start getting points on the board, which they just weren't doing. And you've seen kind of Sean Dyche come in at Everton. Maybe that was a potential factor in terms of they looked at that weekend result and went, okay, because Nathan Jones, I can't see him lasting at Southampton. There's another managerial change potentially coming there as well, even though that's early days. And then you see the fan reaction on Sunday. It got to a point where it's so far over the line, there's no coming back from it, is there? You can't repair that at any stage. And they've obviously convened on Monday and gone, we're just going to have to make the decision now, try and do it. And, there's still a lot of football to be played. There's half the season still to go. The World Cup break, even though they roughly sacked Bielsa roughly around the same time last year, didn't they?
Yeah.
It's a completely different situation this time. So, that reaction on Sunday, I think, would have been a big part of it, because, there's people not taking a liking to him and criticising it. I think when it's so unanimous as an away support, you can't repair that. I think by that point, you just can't repair it, whatever happens.
No, absolutely. And so the search begins then, looking for a new manager. It sounded as if it was going to be put in place very quickly. Obviously, Radrazani's sent a couple of tweets out that I think, especially the white smoke one, has backfired a little bit, I think, with the reaction, because I think we were expecting probably, I think it was probably yesterday morning, to have someone in place, but it's not happened. It does feel like some of the candidates are slipping past us now. Obviously, Corberán signed a new contract, and that's ruled him out. Where do you see this going, and who do you think it could end up going? Because I know that I think Nuno is slowly creeping up, isn't he, in the odds at the moment?
Yeah, I would say on managerial markets, they're incredibly volatile. So I think kind of we look at them a lot every day in most jobs, and it's kind of what it is, and people have probably logically gone, oh, Nuno's there, maybe he wants to come back, and people start seeing, and it's even ex-pro thinks this manager would be good, and then an article in the Netherlands translates it, and they say this, and then everything gets lost in translation to a point when you get an all-arc massive back to people thinking it's fact. Again, it's kind of, I understand Radrazani's desire to keep the fans updated, and I think that's a positive in that way, that the chairman is so open on Twitter and saying, look, this is what we want to do. But of course, when it doesn't work out, if this keeps going on for weeks and weeks and weeks, it's again a pinpoint that people will go back to. When you're looking at, the top two by all accounts, Rayo Vallecano going very well in La Liga. They're not going to want to lose the manager. They're not a very cash-rich club, and maybe they thought this will play to our advantage, but then equally, they're looking at going, my God, we might get in Europe this season, and that's going to be a huge financial boost to us. We don't want to lose that. And Feyenoord have lost one game in the league all season at the top of the Dutch division. They had 50 shots. Did you see that? They had 50 shots, 27 on target in the cup last night, which is remarkable. But that's a side note. But, when you're going for positions like that, that's the risk you take when you're seemingly going for managers and jobs. I think Carlos Corberán was, I think probably it was made out to be a lot closer than he was, by all accounts. I think he was on the list. I don't think it was ever to an advanced stage as some are trying to make out. Lo and behold, he's got a new contract. Great for him. Maybe some games there. But I don't believe that at this stage Leeds have ever ended up with Carlos Corberán. I think it's a long-standing interest. The one name I'm keeping an eye out is Marcelo Gallardo, the ex-River Plate manager. That, for me, is someone who has clearly been a long-term interest. Obviously,
on a sabbatical, isn't he, at the moment?
Yeah, and this is
break, isn't it?
This is kind of when there's talk, he rejected Ajax, this, that, and the other. Well, he always wanted to take a bit of time out of coaching. How long that is, I'm not too sure. Whether he'd be open to coming to the Premier League or stuff like that. But the kind of back to the Bielsa days, when Bielsa was on year-to-year contracts, you always have to have a plan in place. And obviously that goes from Championship to Premier League. And Gallardo's going to be a name that has long been on that list. And it might just get to a point where if he's on an original trio of shortlists, or however that kind of works, the shortlist trio, that not so much he's there, but actually go, well, we kind of equally see him to the other two that we wanted. We can't get them. He's quite receptive to coming over, but we know it's a risk. It's, not just a different league, it's a different continent, and kind of the risks that come with that. I just think when you see someone like Nuno, who is in work, it's not like you can just approach him. He's working in Saudi Arabia, I think it is currently. That the squad isn't really set up to that style. You need someone who wants to play a more intense, attacking, pressing-based football style. Otherwise, it's just not going to work out. So I think,
that's the same with Benitez though, as well, isn't it? Benitez is a very kind of, I can't imagine how it works. Some fans have complained about Marsch football. Well, Nuno and Rafa, it's hardly entertainment, is it?
I think the issue they don't want to get into is you don't really want to see someone who just keeps you up till the end of the season and you will reassess in the summer. I think unless it gets to a desperation stage and then you don't really know where you're at that point. And again, that's just a huge risk. And then suddenly you're down a division and it's not an attractive prospect, stuff like that. You want someone there that is in for a project, but you've got to accept that the two people you want are in very good positions at their current clubs. By all accounts, it's Vallecano rejecting the approach. rather than the manager itself, and whether that can be solved financially remains to be seen in that one. But I don't know. I think they're obviously, they hoped for a straightforward process. They clearly were under the impression that it'd be a straightforward process. But it's a Premier League, and it's easy to kind of overstate this, but it doesn't matter where you are in the Premier League. The Premier League isn't a very, very attractive prospect for anyone.
Yeah.
And with the greatest respect to kind of the other leagues, you've seen the money spent. And if you're a manager and you know that even the team at the bottom of the Premier League can suddenly throw this amount of money at a player, and you're in charge of a team who, financially restricted, kind of having to dive around the markets to pick up a striker and things like that. And this is not being that Premier League snob that, we're better than every other league, but it's just the financial power and the draw that comes kind of with that. And you can see why certain clubs in the Premier League are signing players that you go, how have they got them in? It's because of where they are and the situation it is. So Leeds have that in their favour, but you just don't want it to drag out. I fully expect the current trio to take charge on Sunday, but if someone's appointed by then, that's a problem.
Do you think that result last night has taken the pressure off having to get a quick appointment?
In a way, yes, but it shouldn't really take out the priority element of it. It helps that obviously they've got a point, right? And if it was terrible, they got battered 5-0, then you're going, oh my God, we can't do this again on Sunday. You're going, okay, they were competitive. It's probably a point more than we expected if we're being brutally honest about the back-to-back header and the situation of the teams and the clubs and stuff like that. But it takes the pressure off somewhat, and they know, okay, we could probably trust him to take it again on Sunday. And I think throughout this entire process, I was fully expecting a caretaker trio in charge of both. If you're getting a manager from abroad, there's all the paperwork and complications that come with that. They're not just going to stroll up straight away and walk straight into the training ground and start working. It probably does take the pressure. It shouldn't take the priority off, though. They need someone in, and they need someone in soon, because the longer the process goes on, the more advantage it really is to the other clubs around them. And Leeds don't have that leeway that they built themselves in the early days of the season, that they're well in the mix now and they can't let themselves get kind of swallowed up and playing catch up.
No, I mean, I was chatting before, and on another clip, we're talking to Steve Downs about Huddersfield Town, and he's saying their appointment, because they've just let go of Fotheringham. He's saying their next appointment is absolutely critical, because if you get it wrong, it's relegation for them. Do you see it similar for Leeds? I mean, it can't be the wrong appointment, can it, really? It's a lot of pressure, because if they get this appointment wrong and it doesn't work quickly, we're in serious trouble.
I think then the questions start to be asked of those above, that if it doesn't work out, that fundamentally, apart from Bielsa, managerial appointments haven't worked at the club. There hasn't been a success story with it. And, obviously all the things behind the scenes, takeover talk and stuff like that, that's basically where it could go. It's the same, but with the greatest respect in the Premier League, it's higher stakes, isn't it? And the money involved. Teams are basically just in the Premier League to survive now.
Yeah,
teams aren't fussed about thriving; they just want to survive and be a part of that environment because of the finances involved. It is crucial. Everyone knows it. It's the same with kind of Everton and Dyche and what they've done, and by no means out of it whatsoever. In similar way that Leeds had a good result last night. Same with Everton on Saturday against Arsenal. It's huge. It is huge. Any managerial appointment is going to be a risk, but there's clearly a fundamental style that they want to stick to. Whatever happens, stick to that. That is the biggest thing out of all this. If you can't get your priority targets, don't suddenly go, we'll go to a defensive-minded coach because they're available. You need to stick to this and the approach that you want to take, because it will go wrong if you go elsewhere. That's where it starts to go wrong, when you're deviating away from what you want and you're just taking what's available. It's crucial, but I think we all knew that.
Yeah. Do you sense there's more friction between the 49ers and Radrizzani in sense of the decisions that are being made? I did hear rumours that the 49ers actually wanted to get rid of Marsch in January, but obviously the Rads wanted to stick by him. Do you get the sense that, I mean, we know more than likely the full takeover is going to happen this summer, but I can imagine there's a few anxious board members watching this league table and watching how this is developing this season and getting a bit nervous.
Yeah, I think it's tough to tell, isn't it? Because unless you're actually in the boardroom in these discussions, it's all rumour and reports, isn't it? I think it's a tricky time for the club. not in a bad way, just in the way the process is. And I think whenever the 49ers were first introduced, you knew in the 49ers enterprises that eventually there was probably going to be a point where they take full control of the club. And now we're at that stage. Any future decision now will significantly impact their majority ownership of the club if that does happen, as we're expecting, whether that be players, as we saw in the January window, and the fact that the deals that happen suggest that, as you say, it could well happen in the summer as we're expecting. That it's tricky because they've obviously got a significant involvement already. But when you know that you're essentially going to be running the show very shortly, there's always going to be some influence there, right? But it's incredibly tough to say that unless you're in those discussions, you've kind of just got to take whatever with a bit of pinch of salt, really.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it, when it's kind of split and it's not too dissimilar, the split between them. It does, I can imagine it kind of making it quite difficult when it comes to these kind of overarching decisions. It would have been a lot easier if it had just gone well this season, really, to be honest. Moving away from Leeds United, Super League's kind of reared its ugly head again. What's your take on that?
Just there's a desperation to make it work, isn't it? And
yeah,
again, I keep saying finances, but everything in football comes down to finances, as we've seen in the Premier League this week. I mean, European Super League and their re-emergence probably couldn't have picked a better time following the news that came out of the Premier League and the Manchester City charges and stuff like that. It's a project that it won't go away. There's got to be some, there's a desperation there to work. And I think because of certain top clubs in Europe, it has to work because they couldn't control their own way of finances and stuff like that. They were ridiculous in their spending, and now suddenly they have to deal with the consequences of their actions, and I think that's taken them by surprise. So it will never go away. I think whatever format they come up with, they're trying to make it this more accessible thing, because fundamentally the outrage of the European Super League and everything that came with it was that it's like a closed shop, that we're off. We think we're better than you. Well, clubs that have never won anything, what do you think gives you the right to be a part of it? And you can't join. This is our club. Sorry about that. You have no part of it. So they're clearly trying that now. There's no certain guarantees that clubs will be involved. Look, we're going to have this amount of clubs, and it just gets to a point where it's just ridiculous. That how can it be a Super League with 80 teams in it? Not Super League. That's just a league with everyone in it. It won't go away. Whether it'll work, I think UEFA are obviously adamant that it won't work because we've got our own formats. I just can't. I think there's an element where clubs do have to have a say in how the game is run. That is important. That they're the ones involved, but you can't just let them gang up and say, okay, we're going to do this, because for some of those clubs, it's born out of necessity and it's their own fault. The consequences of their actions are, borderline disastrous for some of these, and that's on you. That's not on the rest of football. Don't take it out on the rest of football, because if you're not seen as a glamorous club, then that's it. You can't be involved. And Brighton, Brentford, Fulham this season are huge stories of that. Well, they're better than your so-called Super League teams, some of them that are going to be involved, and yet they wouldn't be allowed to be a part of it. So again, it's just trying to kind of bully their way into running things how they think it should be, because ultimately some of those who want to be a part of this are failing teams on the pitch, and they can't deal with that.
And I mean, surely our Premier League team, surely they'll be, adamant they want to stay in the Premier League. I know last time they wanted to join it, but I mean, the power of the Premier League, surely they're happy here, aren't they?
Yeah, nobody knows again how this thing works. Truly, they can kind of explain it all they want, and whether it's a Champions League replacement, whether it's this, that, and the other, you can't pick and choose. You have to accept that you are a part of a affiliate type club. You're like, affiliate organization, I should say, sorry, that, that you're a part of that. You have to accept that and everything that comes with it. You can't just pick and mix and pick and choose what you want to do. I think the Premier League clubs as well, some of them who are obviously in the midst of their own takeover talks, probably not a great time for them, because why should they make decisions on when they're trying to essentially pass it over to new ownership, which could make things a little bit tricky. But yeah, they've seen the reaction. Manchester City already have an issue to deal with, which is a pretty significant one. They just need to steer clear of it, because like the Premier League clubs as well, I can't see what they gain out of this. They're already in an incredibly rich league, which is only going to get richer. And it saw it in January. The financial power of this league is eye-wateringly above anything else. And why would you want to give up anything that comes with it? Because you're going to get punished in some way.
Yeah, exactly. Good stuff. If you've liked the video, if you've enjoyed it, please give us a like. Also subscribe to the channel as well for more Leeds United content and other West Yorkshire content as well. Tom, thank you so much for joining us, mate. And we'll see. We might have a new manager in charge by next week.
Yeah, we'll see. No problems.
Thank you.